It's us again.
It's us again. What have you done? Why are we here? Welcome to You Choose. Welcome to You Choose. This is a choose your own adventure style show where we're working our way through the entire CNCF landscape. And so right now we're in chapter 2, where we're taking the application from a development environment through to a production environment. And what are we talking about today, Victor?
We're talking about GitOps.
GitOps.
No. We're talking about ways to synchronize manifests to Kubernetes clusters.
Okay.
Now, if somebody comes up with an alternative to GitOps, we will include it as well.
Let's hear it. Yeah, right now. Let's go in the chat. Please do. Folks who are here, please do say hi in the chat. Tell us what you're using for GitOps now. If you know about GitOps, tell us your feelings about GitOps and how great it is, or bad. Tell us everything. Tell us about your childhood trauma. So up here at the top of the show, what we're going to do first is talk about last week, because y'all made a decision since we've seen you last. Last episode, we talked about cluster provisioning, and we had guests on representing Crossplane and one representing Cluster API, and then we put it to a vote. But before we reveal the answer to what y'all chose, let's talk about cluster provisioning and the two choices and recap a little bit what that was about.
So in both cases, the choices are using Kubernetes to provision Kubernetes, right?
Yeah.
And to clarify, everybody probably knows, but we're including only CNCF projects. So we were not talking about all the ways you can provision Kubernetes clusters, but how you can provision it using CNCF projects. 2 projects in total, as far as we know. There might be more, let us know. And that would be Cluster API and Crossplane. Both of them are similar in terms that you install, and when you install providers, you install something in your cluster, you get custom resource definitions, and then you create custom resources that will do something. Provision cluster. In case of Crossplane, it can be anything. In case of Cluster API, only Kubernetes cluster. It has more varieties of Kubernetes clusters than Crossplane. Crossplane has bigger scope, and so on and so forth. But essentially, it's about managing stuff with Kubernetes. And
Wait,
actually,
I thought this episode was managing stuff with Kubernetes.
Yeah, as well. As well.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I'll get to. I was about to say something. I'm not. Okay. I promised I'll be nice.
I think people enjoy when you have opinions. But so Cluster API in a nutshell, you can declaratively define what you want a cluster to look like with Cluster API, and it has more cluster choices, but it's also more opinionated. And then versus Crossplane, where you can define literally any API as a Kubernetes API, including clusters. That's just one of the many things. And then also with Crossplane, there's less opinion. So when you import an AWS provider, you're importing 872 APIs or something. So you have a lot more control, but also a lot more tedium to figure it out. And then with Crossplane too, you can offer a simplified interface to anyone in your organization who wants to be provisioning clusters. So you can hide all that complexity.
Crossplane ends up being opinionated just as Cluster API. The major difference is that the team behind Cluster API generated those opinions, while with Crossplane, you as somebody in your organization is generating those opinions. But in both cases, we end up with opinions. The question is only who decided what those opinions are.
Yeah. And then we have something in the comments about an interesting point. We did consider including Kubevela in OAM in the cluster provisioning episode, but we ended up deciding to put it elsewhere.
Yes,
about
because we will have later on, quite later, part about defining applications actually. So far we're using Kubernetes primitives for application, and then Kubevela will be there. We were debating to put it both there and here, and honestly I don't remember why we didn't.
Yeah, I don't either. OAM stands
It's
for
a mystery.
Open. Yeah, there
We're
was a
both-
reason once.
I cannot speak in Vit's name, but I'm too old to remember anything happening more than a few days ago. So
Victor's 4 years older than me, so I have 4 years before. Well, to still remember things apparently. And then this is kind of a comments, maybe something worth addressing. How do you have a cluster? You need a cluster to provision a cluster.
yes, you always need something to provision something, right? In other tools, you might say, hey, you need storage to provision something, right? And but once same thing with the tools that we will talk today, those tools are designed to provision things, but then you can say, hey, what provisions those tools, right? The important part that applies both to what we did last week with managing clusters and what we're doing today, in both cases, once you provision those tools, they can continue provisioning themselves from there on, right?
Yeah.
So it's just initial hurdle.
Is it common to use just like a kinds cluster or Minikube or something just to get your initial management cluster
Yes.
going and then use that? Yeah. That seems
Then
like
you
the
move
way
it
to go.
there, and then it continues managing yourself. Yes.
And then how are these different from Terraform? Terraform's not Kubernetes specific.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
all the good things that it would be a long conversation to list all the differences, but think of it this way: what are the reasons why you might or might not be using Kubernetes? And whatever those reasons are, those reasons apply to crossplane as well.
Nice. So or teaching someone to fish instead of giving you the fish.
Exactly.
We're teaching you how to fish.
Drift detection, API extensions, observability, the whole CNCS landscape, all that stuff. And can you put the Christian's comment? Okay, I can actually
Yeah,
put it.
I got it.
There we go. You are not updated, Christian. This is a couple of weeks ago we got provider families. Now you can install only a group of providers that's specific, like only EKS provider, only EKS resources. Not anymore.
Oh, yeah.
No
Nice.
more suffering. You were suffering. No more.
All right, so I think it's time to reveal what y'all chose for your cluster provisioning choice.
Yes, here we go. There we go.
Crossplane. Do you know what? This one was a real nail biter. About 3/4 of the way through, we were at a flat tie with like 120 votes in. And it was
Exactly.
so exciting. Yeah.
It was very, very close. Very, very
Yeah.
close. Anyways, it's cluster API. I mean, it's crossplane. Both projects are great. So, as Whitney likes to say, this is not about winning. And then she
Yeah.
will proclaim the winners.
Then I accidentally used the word winner. Well, and
Exactly.
another important thing we talked about last week too is that it's common to use crossplane with cluster API. They're not mutually exclusive. So if
No.
you want the ease and the opinions of cluster API, but you want to manage it with crossplane because you're managing everything with crossplane, do it. You do you.
Yeah.
You do
Exactly.
you. Express yourself. Yeah. So let's see the demo. Are you ready, Victor?
Let's see the demo. Yeah. Whitney,
right.
can you put me on screen?
done.
There we are.
Yeah.
Let me set it up. Okay, so this is going to be a very quick one because it will be in two parts, right? So let me first show a definition that I already prepared. By the way, I'm looking at the GitHub repo that contains all the code. You can do it all yourself for any combination, not only those that were that won. And the second note is that in the previous season, you chose to use AWS throughout the example, so that's why I'm using AWS today. So I have something called cluster claim. This is me creating what we call compositions that encapsulate all the complexity of managing, in this case, Kubernetes clusters. Through labels, I can select which type I want. Since you all chose AWS, I will use AWS EKS. I want medium nodes. Nobody knows what is medium. It's part of implementation details. Start with 3 nodes, and this is the version of Kubernetes I'm using, which I should have updated to something else, but it does not matter. Now, and Whitney, I want you to pay attention because I'm going to commit one terrible mistake, and you need to tell me which one it is, okay? Okay. I'm going to apply this. So namespace, production. I'm going to apply whatever is defined in crossplane AWS EKS, right? And now my cluster, I don't have production. What do you mean? Okay, create namespace production. Now I will do it. There we go, right? And now if I take a look at behind that, you remember there was like very nice YAML. If I say, give me all the managed resources, it will work for it, and it will work for it, and come on.
So that claim is backed by a full composite resource. That
Exactly.
has a lot of complexity.
So behind that claim is, so think of claim as being my opinion or opinion of my organization, how we should manage Kubernetes clusters, and what should be exposed to other people. And behind the implementation of that claim ended up creating internet gateway, main route table associations, routes, route table associations, route table, security groups, all the stuff that nobody understands, but you need to have in this case in AWS. And it's already working. You can see that some of them are already synchronized. Now this will take its AWS. It will take 20 minutes, give or take, until all those resources are created. We are not going to wait for that. We can maybe revisit the subject at the end of the episode, if that sounds good, Whitney. And now it's your turn, Whitney, to do two things. First, stop sharing my screen. Second,
Okay.
tell me what is a terrible mistake I committed.
You used your development environment as a management cluster
no,
for a...
no,
Okay.
no.
You didn't tell me to pay attention until you were already done talking. I was reading the comments, starting the questions.
No. So the terrible mistake I committed is that I created a cluster by executing kubectl apply.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
I should have pushed it to Git,
Yes. Yes.
right?
We're
And then
solving
one
that
of the
today.
tools that we need to choose today should have synchronized it with the cluster.
Kingdon was paying attention. Kingdon said kubectl apply. I should have just watched the chat.
Exactly. You're the winner, Kingdon.
Okay.
We don't know
Regardless of
about
which
whether
tool
Flux
wins.
will win, but you do.
So yeah, so that's that. We did have a couple questions roll through, but we're gonna go ahead and save. In the interest in moving the show along, we're gonna save all the questions to the Q&A part at the end. So we have them start, and we will get back to them. So don't think we're not listening, because we are, at the expense of each other, of listening to each other, apparently.
We don't listen to each other anyway, so this is just a good excuse.
So that brings us to GitOps. Here we are. So I think a very good first question is, what is GitOps?
Yeah. Me or guess? Shall I answer?
Yeah, you should answer.
It's actually very easy. GitOps manifest, I think. So there were those debates in the past, what is GitOps, what is not GitOps, and then it ended up everything is GitOps. GitHub Actions are GitOps, and so on and so forth. So I think that the link is open GitOps.
Christian already put it in the chat. Go, Christian.
Exactly.
OpenGitOps.dev.
So what is GitOps is very easy to explain, because there are 4 principles. Whichever tool follows those 4 principles is GitOps. And those are declarative, specifying the desired state in declarative format. It needs to be versioned and immutable. That's Git. Pulled automatically. It cannot be pushed. So GitHub Actions, not GitOps. And reconciled continuously. That's why all the GitOps tools are in Kubernetes, among many other reasons.
So you have your definitions. They're written out. They're declarative. They're stored in Git, which makes them naturally versioned and immutable. So if you ever want to change, you're not changing that definition. You're pushing a whole new definition, right? And then they're pulled automatically. So because it's Kubernetes and using that reconciliation loop, it's continuously, like every specified amount of time, pulling those manifests and making sure they're stored in the cluster in the most recent copies on the cluster. And then that goes into and then the action is taken to actually deploy those resources. And that's where the desired state's being reconciled with the actual state.
Exactly. And from
Got it.
now it's the thing that the part where I might actually fight with the guess is that I would say that the actual state is not Kubernetes. The actual state can be anything. It can be Kubernetes. It can be VMs. It can be AWS, Google. The actual Kubernetes is just a man in between the actual state and the desired state.
Or woman, but
Okay, a woman in between. But I thought kind of like, if I say it's a woman in between, kind of like it sounds very offensive, right?
No. Please,
Okay.
no. So here's what I want to know. What was it like before GitOps? What were people doing instead? What
They
the
were
strategy
just
system?
the main difference. So sometimes people would use declarative, sometimes not, and all those things. The major difference is in being pushed instead of pulled, right? So I have a change somewhere, I would push it, meaning that I would execute kubectl apply or whatever the command is, and it would do something. And then whatever happens afterwards, not my problem. So basically, I would say that points number 3 and 4 were most problematic or different.
Will you paint me a picture of like what was problematic about it? Like, or the other side of that same question is like, people are so excited about GitOps. Like it's unanimous. Everyone agrees that GitOps is better. Like what is it doing exactly that's so much better? How is this translating to like real experience?
From the user perspective, you mean, right?
Yeah.
It's just push to Git and forget about it.
Okay.
That's the. So you could say that we could do that before as well, but then we had a lot of problems. There is no guarantee that actually the webhook that would notify somebody to do something would actually really trigger, and we would have conflicts. And so forget about it was very short lasting before, right? Now it's not permanent, but it's longer lasting, let's say.
Also, I mean, with GitOps, people who are interacting with Kubernetes cluster no longer have to, like the whole kubectl apply I just got burned for. Now you don't have to ever interact with the Kubernetes cluster. So your permissions, your RBAC and stuff is happening at the GitHub level or whatever tool you're using.
That also, there are other, you're completely right, but that's not only because of GitOps, it's also, we have observability tools that are giving us information what's happening in a cluster instead of doing kubectl get pods or whatever people are doing. So we have tooling that not only is for synchronization, but for everybody, everything else that actually extracts the information we need or performs sections we need to perform, right? Now, somebody always needs to have access to Kubernetes because when things go terribly wrong, red glass scenario, kind of, okay, not everything we do is wrong. Somebody needs to go, Joe, you know the guy that sits in a basement that nobody ever met? That guy. He needs to fix it.
Somebody with the pipes dripping.
Exactly.
Cold air. Cool. Is there anything else you think is important to? Let's talk about quickly. What are we looking for when we're judging these tools? When we're hearing these presentations coming up?
I feel that all the tools right now are fulfilling the core GitOps principles, right?
So you can't go wrong.
Yes. I think that the differences are more in details and in the additional features, right? So Argo CD has some very unique features, Flux as well, kapp-controller, right? So they're not that different, I feel, and guess might correct me, in what they do, but rather in additional value that they provide.
Yeah. And we're getting some chatter about like why GitOps. And so it's better for security because you don't need to open any connections to your cluster to make changes.
Exactly. It's completely locked.
But beneficial that you don't need to open up the Kubernetes API.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in terms of what we're looking for in these tools, every tool is doing a good job. So it's more a matter of whatever your particular use case is, or maybe it's just a preference for how you like to work. That might be why you're choosing one of these tools as opposed to, that's really why you're choosing all the tools. But in this episode, I will say the tools are way more apples to apples than they have been in the other episodes we've done.
So my way of describing Argo CD and Flux, and I'm excluding kapp-controller now from the story, not because it's not good, it's excellent. But my description between Argo CD and Flux is like Cold War back in 50s, 60s. Once one side actually manages to get in front, the other one catches up and then, kind of It's that type of small differences, right?
Because there are two of them, the whole field of GitOps is going way faster than it would have had there just been one project coasting.
Exactly.
But I will say, like, I know people on both sides of the line, and everyone's super nice, and they are always really friendly to each other. So if you're looking for a fight, I don't think you're going to find it here. We're taking measures. And
No, wait until Scott joins the conversation. We'll have a fight. I know Scott, yes.
Scott will go for the jugular. I had something. It's gone now, I think. I'm just going to say again, I'm going to say this a few times, that this is not about choosing a winner. I may accidentally say winner, but it's really... Whatever, when we do go to a vote, whatever project you choose...
It is about winning.
Don't necessarily choose the one that like you're biased toward, or the one that you use, or the one that you think is like choose one that you want to see implemented in a demo. Choose one you want to learn more about. So it's not a popularity contest, and whoever gets chosen isn't necessarily the winner. That doesn't mean that's a superior tool. It just means people were interested in it. That's what we got. That's all you get. And you get to be in our demo. And then Scott loves making Victor suffer. So whatever seems hardest to implement.
No,
is
you
always
cannot
a
do
good
it.
choice.
All three tools are easy to use. I like them all three. I like all three, so it's all good. You cannot make me suffer in this one. There are episodes where you can, but not this one.
Yeah. All right.
Actually, you could make me suffer, but the fourth tool, which I'm not going to name, is not in CNCF, so suffer avoided.
So let's say hello to our guests. We're going to do introductions. So right now, and the introductions aren't part of their very strict 5-minute presentation. So first we're going to say, we decided to go in order of when the tool was created. So therefore, we're going to introduce Kingdon first. Hello, Kingdon. Welcome. Please come off mute and tell us a little bit about yourself, friend.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kingdon. I'm an open source support engineer at Weaveworks on the developer experience team, and I'm also a Flux maintainer.
Right on. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us. We'll see you in a little bit. Your time is almost ready. Yeah, do some jumping jacks or something. All right, see you soon. All right, and next up we have Christian. Hello, Christian. Welcome.
Hey, hi. So Christian Hernandez, head of community over here at Acuity. I am also a contributor to the Argo project.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here. You are also, I do a show called Enlightening, and Christian was my guest.
Yes.
I guess it's been almost a year, a long time ago, to teach me about Argo. Yeah, teach me about Argo CD. So, yeah, so wonderful to have you. Thank you so much. And then finally, we have Scott Rosenberg, who was our guest before talking about Carvel YTT. And now you're here to teach us about Carvel kapp-controller. Introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Scott Rosenberg. I'm the lead architect in the CT office at TerraSky, and a happy user of Carvel kapp-controller, and happy to be here.
So glad to have you, Scott. Thank you so much. We're going to hide you again. And for those of you who are here the first time, the way this goes is that every project gets 5 minutes every guest gets 5 minutes to teach about their project. And we're very strict about the 5 minutes. Victor, are you ready to be our timekeeper today? Yes. Oh, you have the gong. Do you have a timer too? The timer part's important also.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And
So Victor's going to keep time on our guests, and when that 5 minutes is up, it's over. But if you have questions, please do ask those questions in the chat. We're not going to get them to them during the presentations, but we will have a Q&A part at the end. Okay, is there anything else you want to say before we give Kingdon some lights? All right, Kingdon, are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready to go.
Okay,
let's go.
Is my screen share?
Now it is.
All right, ready to go. Okay, so this is Flux in 5 minutes. My name is Kingdon, as I already said, and I'm a Flux maintainer on the website and community teams. Let me start this over so my timer's right. I'm sorry. Oh no. Okay, Flux in 5 minutes. So GitOps, we already explained this, so I can reclaim some time here. And so what we're seeing here is that a dev pushes changes to Git and then they go to Kubernetes. This is really simple, but if you're new to GitOps, it's best to start here. At a high level, that's GitOps, and Flux does GitOps. So how does Flux do GitOps exactly? Well, we heard that it's an agent in the cluster, like all of these solutions, that pulls changes. They're declarative configuration artifacts, and they are versioned immutably in Git, and they're reconciled continuously. So how does that look? This is about how it looks. So Flux is made of microcontrollers, and the microcontrollers, I'm calling them microcontrollers, but they're controllers, they're microservices. They operate over these CRDs. And what you should notice about this one here is there's a little subscription between the Git repository and the customization. This is going to become important later. The customization applies the resources to Kubernetes. The Git repository pulls from Git. So this is basically the same diagram as we had before. So what is different? What's new in GitOps GA? This is not exactly new, but it's newly promoted to GA to V1 status as the receiver with the Git repository and customization. So all these resources are production ready and GA in Flux V2. And what this does is it allows the Git repository that lives outside of the cluster to automatically notify the Git repository object in the cluster. So we have nice observability primitives, and we can see what's wrong when something is wrong. Is it failed to pull, or is it failed to apply? Is there a validation error? And it will come from one or the other resource. So that's great. And what else is new in Flux V2? So we have SALSA build level 3. That's an advanced provenance certification that we have also workload identity support for all the major cloud providers for OCI repositories, which we haven't talked about yet. We have horizontal scaling now. That's a new feature in Flux. You can create shards if your Flux instance is very large. In the ecosystem, there are many companies and vendors and tools. There's Weave GitOps, which is an open source UI, and there's an enterprise version of that. There's a VS Code extension called GitOps Tools. This is something that I work on with coworkers. And you might already be using Flux because Flux is embedded in a lot of solutions that are promoted by cloud providers. You may already have one of these in your stack. So the community is great. Like I mentioned, there's paid support from Weaveworks. There is a fantastic team of maintainers and contributors. Our community is, there's a contributor ladder. If you want to check out the events calendar, you can come and even work with us on Flux and learn what's going to happen in the future. We have many adopters in large prominent enterprises like these, and partners in industry who are building products on Flux, like I mentioned, Weaveworks and Microsoft. So companies have trusted Flux for years at this point. Automation, there's many automation opportunities in Flux. My favorite at this point is the Semver source ref. This is the best for scalability and security. It has really great properties, especially when you compare it to image update automation, which is the old favorite that writes back to Git. When you have a new app image, we'll write the tag back to your Git manifest. This is a little problematic for reasons we'll see in a minute. And there are Flagger and Terraform controller, which are other automations that are involved in progressive delivery. And we talked about doing Kubernetes or GitOps outside of Kubernetes. So that's another opportunity for that. So we talked about GitOps without Kubernetes. What about GitOps without Git? Well, we have this OCI repository resource in Flux that you can use to ship manifests once they are certified by CI. So you can sign your manifests and have Flux verify them before they're loaded into the cluster. And this is the same assembly we saw before with the receiver hooked up to the OCI registry via webhook. And in this case, what's different is it's not users pushing to Git, it's CI pushing to your OCI registry, which is something you probably already have. So OCI capabilities that you have that you wouldn't have had before, well, there are performance benefits that we can't get into detail about, but especially with Helm and also security. So the main benefit is we don't have to pull Git repositories into our cluster. So when we start with one Git repository, we move on to many Git repositories. Are we 1 minute warning here?
Okay. No, we're out of time. There it is.
Oh, no. Okay, I had so much more to say, but here vote for Flux.
Kingdon, if you want to share your slides, feel free to do that in the chat. If you can't put a link in, just private chat it to us.
I will figure out how to do that at some point. But
Cool. Thank you
you.
so much. That was wonderful. Appreciate you, Kingdon, and we'll see you again soon for the Q&A section.
Okay.
And next up, we have Christian.
Christian.
Welcome, friends.
Oh man, that was tense. Okay.
Now you know
I was
what's
gonna
waiting
say,
for
man.
you.
Wow, yeah, I'm glad I didn't go first, man. That's tense. Okay.
Here we go. Be ready.
All right.
Don't get gonged. Okay, bye.
Okay, no gong. All right. So again, my name is Christian Hernandez. I am head of community over at Acuity, and the GitOps kingpin, as I like to call myself. Been in the GitOps space for a while now. So just basically short history of Argo. So what is Argo? So people say Argo and Argo, Argo CD and Argo, kind of like interchangeably. But Argo is actually a project, right? It's a project made up of a suite of tools, 4 tools. And the 4 tools are up there, but it was originally developed at a company called Applatix. Originally, the Argo was created at Applatix. When they say Argo, they actually mean Argo workflows. And Applatix was actually later acquired by Intuit, and Intuit open sourced the Argo projects, right? With all these other internal tools are developed. And the Argo project is actually famously by if you go by the number of stars, right, Argo workflows and Argo CD are the 2 most popular projects in the Argo project. And it is once it was open sourced by Intuit, others joined, and it's maintained by Acuity, right? So Acuity is a company that was founded by the co-founders of the original Argo project, right? So they are maintainers along with BlackRock, CodeFresh, Intuit, and Red Hat. I put it in just in alphabetical order and no other order other than that. So it's not only maintained by these companies, it's actually the 3rd fastest growing project in the CNCF. So I want that to sink in a little bit, because the only projects that are ahead of Argo is OpenTelemetry and Kubernetes itself. So it's kind of humbling to be part of that conversation, right? To be part of the 3rd fastest growing project in the CNCF. So this is, it's not just, a handful of companies doing this. Is a lot of contributors from all over. So this is something we're kind of proud of here. So Argo CD in a nutshell. I will try to go fast because poor Kingdon, he was going well until he was cut off. So I'll do this really quick. But just in a nutshell, our Argo CD is nothing but a Kubernetes controller that sits on your cluster, and it pulls from your desired state. Desired state being Git or Helm. OCI has a little bit of support, but it'll be fully supported in later releases. But you can do it with Helm charts currently. And it basically just take your desired state. We're talking about GitOps, and making sure your running state on your cluster is the reconciled, right, is the same. And you can kind of use Argo, kind of like in a hub and spoke kind of design, where it's like, okay, I'm not only managing this cluster, but I can, go and manage other clusters as well. Kind of have a, kind of like the central point of control. Has a flexible design, has other cool stuff too. You can have an Argo instance in, hub and spoke like before, or you can have an instance everywhere else and just control everything via Git, or via Helm, or, whatever your Git processes are, to control your fleet. So it has that basic design. I see I have about 90 seconds, which is awesome because I get to kind of highlight some of the stuff that Argo has, right? So it has an NPS score of 76. So what does that mean, right? Like I'll quantify it for you. Nintendo, who has Switch, by the way, I'm playing Zelda right now. I'm obsessed with it. Has a score of 42, and it's considered good, right? So Argo has a score of 76, so everyone loves it. A feature-rich UI, right? So you comes out of the box. You can get a UI and on-ramp your developers very quickly by having them use UI. It has support for things like enterprise SSO, feature-rich RBAC, right? So config management plugins. So if you want to use something like Carvel's TTY or Q or whatever, you can plug those in. Argo CD will understand those. as well. Multi-tenant, Helm customize, it can basically take anything you throw at it and it'll try to deploy it. Has support for partial and selective syncs, right? So you can do things like, hey, I want you to only target the replica count, for example. And it looks like I have 15 seconds. It has native support for Helm diffing and reconciliation. So that comes out of the box. It has support for hooks, pre and post hooks, and it's Open GitOps compliant. And I think I am out of time.
Somehow this turned into the Gong Show.
It is. Wow. You should give people like 6 or 7 minutes. I don't know.
You had time to talk about how much you like to play Zelda. I think we gave you too much time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Good point.
If you had time to reintroduce yourself again, that means that you're fine. You got more time than you deserve.
Touche. Good point. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Christian. We'll see you again soon. All right, Scott, we're joking about you and how competitive you are.
Me competitive? No.
Let's see it. I love that I'm seeing a console right now. Oh, you're doing these red slides. We got these last week from his name's escaping me. Yeah,
Tell
for
me when
Cluster.
I'm starting my counter and I'll get started.
You starting now.
Wonderful. So hello. Today we're going to talk about Carvel kapp-controller. So Carvel kapp-controller has a few key features that we want to talk about. Number one, it's a powerful and flexible CD tool for GitOps needs, but it's also a very powerful package management solution for Kubernetes. It has a unified API for multiple templating and source formats versus other solutions where we have a lot of different CRDs to do things that we have to cobble together. We have one CR that we can really mix and match different technologies based off of our needs. And it's extremely powerful and beneficial for air-gapped use cases. When I talk about, it being composable, well, yes, we support Git. It's GitOps for our source, but we also support HTTP, any HTTP source. We support OCI images, image package bundles, another Carvel creation that's amazing. We support Helm repositories. We can template using Helm, using YTT, using QLang, using kbuild, using Mozilla SOPs for encryption, and we deploy using kapp. So with that being said, I hate slides. Let's move on to a demo. Yay. So let's first deploy our apps here to our cluster. And I'm just going to do that. I already deployed them because it takes some time. So yay. But you can see they're unchanged. And if we take a look at the manifest that we've deployed, basically I have 6 different applications here. So let's try and see what kapp-controller can offer us. The first app that we have is I'm deploying Cert Manager. In this case, I'm creating an application. We're specifying here the service account that is going to be used to reconcile this application. I'm putting together a specific Git commit from a repo. And this is actually using Q to template out my repository. I'm giving it the Q module path and telling it what output expression to use, and finally deploy using kapp. If we take a look at another example here, which is using Contour, here we're just giving it an HTTP source. So we don't need to have things in Git in order to utilize this. We can bring it in. It's the exact same experience. We can fetch here. In this case, we're using kbuild to template to replace out the tags with SHA digests on our manifest before they get deployed. So we get actually a safe thing to deploy and not tags, which are mutable. The next example that we have is using Redis. And in this example, what we can see is we're actually fetching from a Helm repository directly. And then we're using Helm templating with some values which come from a secret, and I'm deploying using kapp. Now, one of the strengths that we have because we're deploying with kapp is we can use some really cool options like apply ignored true, which will force delete PVCs when I delete this app, something that stateful sets don't do. Yay, fun. Here we can do that. So we can utilize all of these features of kapp directly in a CI, in a CR. If we take a look here at the Nginx example, here I'm actually doing something interesting where I'm pulling down a Helm chart from a Git repository, doing a Helm template, again, with secret values. And then on top of that, the Helm chart doesn't expose values that I want. But what can I do? I add another templating step after that of YTT as sort of a post renderer on top of the template where I add an overlay doing what I want, run kbuild, and finally deploy it using kapp. If we take a look at the final example here, this is my simple app. And here we're using what's called the downward API within YTT. The strength here is that we can get that capability we have in Helm of the capabilities where we can get what Kubernetes APIs are available within our templating, not just in Helm, but we can use this for YTT, for Q, for Helm, for anything. And we can expose the kapp-controller version, the Kubernetes version, anything from the AppCR itself in as data values for our templating engine to utilize. So if we take a look at this, one of the great things about GitOps is being able to manage from a single place multiple clusters. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a diff against two different manifests. This is the same app being deployed to two different clusters. One is the local cluster, and the green is the remote cluster. We can see the only difference is in my CR. In one case, I specify service count name, and the other one, a reference to what namespace and the kube config in a secret that we want to deploy to. And if we take a look here at my simple app, which I did and just run it through Tidy, we can see this is my app that's running, and we can see how the download API works. Hello from the default namespace, deployed by kapp-controller with what version on Kubernetes in that version, and all the APIs accessible there. So additional features, we use Kubernetes RBAC, no custom RBAC in CSV files sitting in config maps, no super user service count, easily deploy apps and packages to remote clusters. We don't need you to decompose a kube config. Simple management of encrypted values with SOPs, supports pulling from multiple sources and multiple template engines all in a single app. And why choose kapp-controller? It's the best GitOps tool. We already chose YTT for templating, and kapp-controller is the only one that supports YTT. And we have package management capabilities. Thank you, I made it in time.
I almost used it.
We love the gong. That was really wonderful. Thank you very much. And now let's bring everybody back on.
Yeah.
We have such an active, wonderful chat today. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. We have so many questions. So let's just hop right in. Do you want to lead, Victor, or shall I?
I like when we step on each other's toes and then nobody knows who's leading. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I have a question for Scott.
Oh,
Yeah.
excellent. Let's
You
do it.
mentioned that YTT is only supported by a kapp-controller, but did you know that you can fix that in, this is kind of a leading question. This is not a good question.
Yeah,
but
I'm seeing this.
You can fix that in OC. You can use YTT in Flux. So just to get that on the table.
No, there's a YTT controller.
No, not a controller. You would do it in CI.
Oh.
And Christian said Carvel, he called it TTY, but I think he meant Carvel
Yeah,
YTT. Yeah.
YTT, yes. Well, TTY because I was on the computer, right? So it's I'm looking at my yes, as a configuration management plugin. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with questions. From Rodrigo, in relation to CI/CD tools, how is an implementation with GitOps normally like CI to create the build and GitOps with Argo CD to deploy an example? This seems like a question that already answers itself, right?
Yeah, I was about to say that. I'm like, I think you answered your own question in your question. Yes.
The way how I like to describe it, and I don't know what the rest of you think about it, I tend to split tasks into one-shot actions and tasks that should be continuous, right? Like building an image, you build an image once. There is no good reason why that should be done outside CI, for example, pipelines, GitHub Actions, Jenkins, whatever you're using, And there are other tasks like that, and then we have tasks that should simply run in the background continuously, which is where we are talking about GitOps.
So that's one of the ways where I think YTT is a really interesting choice and a great choice, because as I was reading about YTT, I saw that it doesn't have access to networks and it's hermetically sealed. And so it's the type of thing that would be safe to run in a controller, unlike other manifest generation tools that might not be safe to run in your controller necessarily, based on network access or things you might not want them to have.
Yeah. No, it's one of the strengths really in the Carvel tool set with it's all a bunch of CLI tools that were then put together also into a controller, but that they were all built very much with like that security aspect of being locked down as the first thing. All of the CLI tools are very, sometimes to an annoying extent, but they are very security driven, and especially YTT.
Okay.
There's a one I'm pretty excited about. This one says, I read somewhere online that Flux is more intended for admins and Argo for developers. What's your take on that? Let's start with Christian on that.
Yeah, so it's a little nuanced, right? So it's that is coming from like the background of each tool. So Flux was developed by SREs in order to keep the lights on. So it has like a lot of the stuff that like from a SRE standpoint like was built into the tool, whereas Argo CD was basically written to on-ramp developers onto a Kubernetes cluster. So it attacked the problem from the other side. It's like, okay, like how do we get these developers onboarded to using Kubernetes, right, really, really, really fast? And Flux was written from the other side, like oh, hey, let's, we're SREs, you need to keep the lights on. Let's, we want to recover from a disaster or whatever. So it's kind of two sides to the same coin. So that's is probably where they read like, hey, it's intended for admins or Argos. Yeah. I'm like, well, not necessarily. It's just their background. Doesn't necessarily they're meant for a specific group. Yeah.
Kingdon, what's your take? Do you agree?
I think the reason this perception persists the way it does is because Flux wasn't released with a UI. So people come to Flux and they see people using a CLI and they say, well, these are admin people. And I use a CLI. I don't know if that makes me an admin person, but there are great UIs. I work on one of them. There are third-party UIs. And so I think we've moved past that point. At this point, Flux is for anyone who wants to get their hands dirty.
Okay. And Scott, I want to give you a chance to talk too. What do you think? Or maybe where does kapp-controller fit?
I think it's definitely the perception that we're seeing, and I think the same thing goes. Kapp-controller falls on that side of Flux more, right? I think a lot of that also comes down to a lot of things, like were mentioned that, like was mentioned about Flux. You probably may be using it without even knowing about it because it's part of a solution. Kapp-controller and Flux very much are part of like larger vendor solutions. I know that Argo is as well, but like as an under the hoods tool, much more, at least from what I'm seeing, kapp-controller in all of the VMware Tanzu ecosystem. We're seeing Flux in EKS Anywhere, also in some Tanzu stuff and in Arc and whatever. And we're seeing those as, the composable bits being used under the hoods. And because of that, I think they also have the perception of being more operator focused. I don't think it's true about either of them. I think both of them are great for developers as well. But it's definitely the perception that at least we're seeing.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, for developers, really the part that is most interesting for developers is I can push to Git. And
regardless of which tool.
Potentially, I can visualize what's going on, whatever the visualization is, whether it's terminal or UI or this or that, right?
Exactly.
We had a question during Kingdon's presentation. You talked about Flux v2 and webhooks. And so someone was like, wait, didn't we already just say that webhooks are bad? Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so the reason why we use those webhooks there is because we have native opportunities in Kubernetes to build subscriptions between Kubernetes resources. They all live on Kubernetes. So we don't have that opportunity. Maybe we would if we integrated crossplane somehow, but we don't have that opportunity with setting up remote webhooks on a service that lives outside the cluster. So as far as the reliability of webhooks, I think that issue is drastically overstated. But on the other hand, Flux reconciles continuously. The default intervals are 10 minutes. So that's the primary action of GitOps, right? The webhooks are just designed to make things go faster. If you want your developers to wait 10 minutes or to fiddle with the reconcile to make sure that their change is actually going through before they push the demo, then don't implement webhooks. Yeah.
If I understood right, and I haven't used that part of Flux, it's more that just to notify the Flux, hey, you might not want to wait until the next cycle.
It's just to give the Git repository the same opportunity that its downstreams have.
Yeah, I always tell people using webhooks isn't GitOps, although you will use webhooks in your GitOps deployment, right? Like it's not like a mutually exclusive. Like, no, you're going to use webhooks. Yeah. Like, duh. Like you're going to use webhooks. We're not saying they're evil. We're just saying only using webhooks isn't GitOps. So
exactly,
that's the distinction.
We got interest in the OCI part in Kingdon's presentation, but really, I think everyone showed examples of their tool working with things that are not Git itself. So instead of maybe saying too much about it since you all can do that and you all talked about it in your presentation. This person is requesting to learn more. So if you all have like a link to your slides or a link to further resources, especially how it can your tool can integrate with things other than Git. If you share those in the private chat, we'll put them in the chat here live now, but also Victor can put them in the comments in the video later. Again, we got another comment like GitOps without Git, mind blown. But it seems like something all y'all do. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that we're talking about not having Git at all. We're just talking about what should be in Git and what should be out, right? Image,
really
for example,
about how you
container
scale,
image
yeah.
is not in Git, so you're not getting the whole everything in Git, right? It's more a reference.
All
to
of your
things.
applications are going to be built in Git. The question is, are you doing it with a mono repo or micro design? So does every repo have its own app in it? Are you going to pull all these repos into the cluster? If you have thousands of apps, is this a good idea? What if there's a ton of irrelevant content in the app, in the repo? There could be, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that isn't YAML manifests in there. So that's all going to slow things down, and that's going to make it more difficult to scale. Plus, you have a chicken and egg problem. If you're pushing releases directly from Git, that may mean that they haven't been through CI yet. So there's a possibility that you have manifests that are ahead of CI, and CI fails. And now you're trying to synchronize something to the cluster that hasn't been pushed, hasn't been signed, and doesn't exist, and you've got image pull back off. So that's one of the problems that OCI repository solves roundly.
Yeah. OCI repositories also, it can really help solve air-gapped scenarios a lot, especially like tools like Image Package, which, go with the idea of bundling together the OCI artifacts, like images, container images, together with manifests in a OCI artifact. We can then, it's much easier to move a single artifact like that between environments when you're moving to air-gapped and things like that than it is to move around a Helm chart that's located in some Git repository, plus a manifest that sits somewhere else, plus the images that sit in 17,000 registries. There can be a benefit to OCI as well, especially in use cases like that.
One thing that was different from y'all, it sounded like Argo CD and Flux have a super user account and Kapp doesn't. Is that something, did Tyler hear that correctly? I think that would be something for Scott.
I think you need cluster admin if you're going to install CRDs on the cluster, bottom line. So,
exactly. So I'll make a point to what I meant there when I was saying that. The way the kapp-controller works is the service account of kapp-controller does not actually have permissions on the cluster beyond the fact that it can impersonate the service account that you supply in your app CR. So in every single application, you define a service account and it has credentials. That is the service account that will reconcile your application. Meaning if the developer does not have access to a service account with credentials, he can't do anything. If the developer on the other end has access to the customization CR and the Git repository CR, if Flux was configured with cluster admin so CRDs could be deployed using Flux, technically he can deploy CRDs unless you have OPA, Kyverno, some other policy management blocking it. Right?
We want to implement the multi-tenancy advice there's a multi-tenancy cheat sheet if that's where you're headed.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Victor, this is a question for you. For the first time
For
ever,
me?
Well, it's a show hosting question. We have more questions than we could possibly get to in our allotted show time.
Okay.
What shall we go over our show time and hit them all? Do you want to pick a few highlights and?
We can go a few minutes over.
Okay.
Yeah. And
right.
Here's a new rule for the guests: speak fast.
That's how we're going to prioritize.
Are you gonna have a gong? Are you gonna have a gong every time we speak? It's just like call us off. Yeah.
No, I'm way past the gong. I have the admin rights. I can remove you from the stream.
Got you.
First time he mutes you, second time he removes you from the stream.
You've already got the go.
So here's a comment and a question. I'd love to see event-based triggers instead of hooks in the GitOps queue so we could pull change events off a queue, maybe based on cloud events. What do y'all think about that? Christian, you go first.
So event-based triggers is in GitOps, I think you will have event-based things happening. And so, I mean, there's tools in the ecosystem that do that. I mean, specifically for Argo, there is Argo events that is event-based triggers, right? So like if something happens, then then trigger these other events that do something else that can work in tandem with the GitOps controller, right? So then you can use something like really the example in my head is like, okay, when there is like a pull request, deploy an example, right? Like deploy that pull request so I can preview that environment before I actually merge it and see it live. So that's definitely there are event-based tools, and you can definitely use them with your whatever GitOps controller you come up with.
Cargo is in a way falling into that category, right? It is watching for your registry and updating it, right? It's basically waiting for events just from registry, right?
And events in that you can also say like and ors, right? Like you can and or it as well as like it when there's a new image and if there's a new pull request, then deploy it. Yeah, for sure.
Anyone else want to speak to that, or shall we move on?
I'm not sure if I agree with that. I'm just thinking because I'm not sure what the difference is between hooks and an event-based model, but it sounds like content, and that's what we've shied away from doing in Flux. The notification webhook is just a push. It doesn't tell you anything about the content. It just says it's time to reconcile now, and that's how we can say that it's still strong GitOps, because there's no and the drawback is there's no guarantee that every change will be applied in order. So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Next question: what happened with the GitOps engine that was being pulled out of Argo?
Now we're going to go half an hour overboard.
I don't know what I'm stepping into. Let's start with Kingdon on this one.
That's a bag dog of doo doo that you just lit right there. We'll try our best. We'll try our best to answer that question.
Or point to a blog post or something.
I'm not sure how we answer this one really, other than to say that there are different tools for different use cases, and the development just didn't converge the way that they expected it to.
I love that short answer. And for those of us who have no idea what's going on, we can move on. Here's a dig on Argo CD. It's pretty nice, but wish Argo CD could handle errors better. What do you say to that?
I would like to know which errors are being. There's not enough there. That's like really open ended. Like it'd be nice. You can find us on the CNCF Slack, right, with all the other CNCF projects. So if you have a specific error you want to ask, I'm on there. You can ask.
Love it. Yes, utilize the community. I've heard this about Argo CD. It doesn't support Helm as well as Flux does. So is that something? Well, actually, maybe Kingdon, you can talk about how you integrate with Helm. And then Christian, you can talk about how you intend to. And actually, let's not leave Scott out. You can talk about kapp-controller and Helm too.
I think that Helm is one of those, you don't see it, but actually differences between the two, at least.
Yeah, Helm has got imperative workflows inside of its whole declarativeness. So it's kind of a weird oddball in the whole ecosystem, because it has things that you want to make sure happen once, and they are in an install hook. And then you have other things that you want to make sure happen every upgrade, but those are in an upgrade hook. They don't happen on a continuous loop. So those are places where Flux and Argo can disagree on how they are implemented. And I think Argo has some pre-existing webhook of their own that you can use without Helm. So that's nice. But Flux uses the Helm SDK under the hood so that it's basically byte for byte identical for how Helm is going to behave.
Yeah, and so the way Argo approaches Helm is Argo is a Kubernetes first-class citizen only, meaning that Argo, the creators of Argo, decided that we're only going to work with raw YAML regardless of the tool. Doesn't matter. So therefore, what ends up happening is that Argo CD runs what's equivalent to Helm template to generate those YAML and then apply the YAML. And so, not, as Kingdon mentioned, not a lot of the hooks are one-to-one compatible. Argo will convert some of those Helm hooks into Argo CD pre and post sync hooks, but not everything is convertible, right? So that's kind of what the big difference is Argo works with raw YAML only, and will only want to work with raw YAML.
You have Argo has annotations that are somehow, some of them equivalent to what people, pre-sync, post-sync,
and sync hooks.
Things.
The big issue I've seen, and I have a blog post about it, is when you have a database migration, you typically need the database and everything to be online first, and it's a install hook. Argo says it should happen after those things are online, but if they're not going to be marked ready before the database migration is done, then that migration will never happen. So that's where people get hung up. I've seen that in like the Sentry chart, for example. It's one of these really complex charts that just has a million things in it.
And Scott, we talk about kapp-controller. Yeah, you're on it.
Yeah, kapp-controller falls much more into the Argo CD set of tools here. We work with raw YAML, and kapp deploys it, and we do basically a Helm templating as part of that. There are solutions within kapp as well, within kapp-controller, using kapp configs, where we can basically set ordering of different resources to solve the ordering. But you have to convert your Helm hooks into other configurations, because it simply just doesn't work with Helm template. But yeah, kapp-controller took the same decision as Argo. We work with raw YAML. Bring your templating engine, but we use Helm as a templating engine, not as a deployment tool.
Right on.
Shall we do two more, Whitney, of your choosing?
One real quick, and then I'll think of two while you talk. But I think this might be a quick answer. Is there ever a reason to use in y'all's tools in tandem with each other, like together?
I sure thought there was. This was my idea. I'm going to take credit for Flamingo, even though I haven't done any of the development work. Shanwit, who works at Weaveworks, did a great job connecting these two things together. This sort of came from an idea that I had while I was at KubeCon Los Angeles. And I had a chat with LXM, and I said, do you think this would be possible? And he said, yeah, probably. I mean, it wouldn't be that much work. You'd do 1, 2, 3 things here. And I brought that back, and I just parroted it to my team for a little while and said, can we build an Argo CD that will help us visualize Flux resources? Because right now we don't have a great UI. This is over a year ago. And it turned out to be not very difficult. So if you are using these two tools together, if you have teams that are using them both, that I don't think we can put that on the voting options today, but it's possible. And it's great for Terraform controller. If you want to add Terraform capabilities to Argo CD, you can do it today.
Excellent.
Also, I can say that kapp-controller I use a lot with part of Flux, because one of the great things in Flux is that everything is its own controller. So I use the Flux source controller to pull down things from Git that are used by multiple different sources within the cluster, including app CRs of kapp-controller that I just use in HTTP source. That way I don't need to be throwing around Git credentials everywhere in the world. I can have Flux pull it down, have it accessible within the cluster, and then have multiple tools pull from there. Which is cool.
Totally cool. Okay, is kapp-controller used in production environments?
Yes, in many production environments.
Okay.
All of the Tanzu suite of tooling, whether it be their Kubernetes offerings from VMware, TKG, and the 7 different offerings, or probably 8 by the time that this session is over, of different Kubernetes distributions, Tanzu application platform, Tanzu build service, all of these tools use kapp-controller under the hood, as well as there's a large open source community really growing around it, especially since it joined the CNCF as a sandbox project that we're starting to see more and more use.
Cool. And then I'm going to ask the second half of this question to everybody about RBAC and how does your project work with RBAC. And then we're going to do our closing statements. And for the closing statements, I would like you each to focus on what sets your tool apart from the other tools, really what use case, not what's better, as we talked about. It's not a winning thing, but what use case is your tool well suited for? So, but first we'll go around and talk about RBAC, and then we're going to do our closing statements. So, Kingdon, will you start on this one, please?
Yeah, the answer is pretty easy. Flux uses RBAC as it's designed. So if you have the service account in your namespace, then you can attach it. And if you enable the Flux multi-tenancy model according to the guidance, then you will have to do that. Otherwise, your Flux resources won't have any permission to do anything. So attach a service account, bind the roles, and that's it.
Excellent. Now, what about you, Christian?
So Argo CD comes with its own feature-rich RBAC system. It is meant to, since originally Argo CD was written to give developers an interface into Kubernetes, it has its own RBAC system. So RBAC system that can tie into the Kubernetes RBAC system or the or an SSO, right? They can broker a lot of those things. So like if you have like an LDAP provider or GitHub SSO, you can log in, you get that user, you can map that user to a certain account on Argo CD. So the RBAC model is Argo CD has its own RBAC system that it uses to manage the platform.
And then how does kapp-controller handle RBAC, please?
Kapp-controller is multi-tenant by design, and there's no way around it. So you have to specify a service account or a kube config to utilize within every single app CR. And if it has permissions, good for you. And if it doesn't, bad for you. You'll get reconcile failed. Have a nice day. Ask the cluster admin for more permissions. Yeah.
So there are lots of questions we didn't get to. So those of y'all who are watching, if we didn't get to your question, everyone has their social media as part of their handle right now. Kingdon's not on Twitter, which I totally respect. So Kingdon's is, that's how they would. Yeah. Oh,
I don't know what you call it now.
Just threw up in my mouth a little bit. Yeah. So that's Kingdon on Slack or on GitHub. But also, each of y'all have a Slack workspace that you could go to get to. And are all of those in the CNCF? In the CNCF workspace, do you each have channels there? Is that the place to look for y'all? Okay.
I am there, yes.
Kubernetes
Yeah.
Okay.
Slack. Kubernetes Slack for Carvel.
Okay, Carvel. So, and you're not looking for kapp-controller, you're looking for Carvel. So say hi to the
Exactly.
communities, ask your questions there. People will be more than happy to answer. So if we didn't get to your questions, sorry. But it's, too much of a good thing. So let's do our closing statements, please. Oh, Victor has something to say.
No. Go.
Okay, you're
I'm
the host.
too early.
You shouldn't
I'm
have
too
to
early.
raise your hand. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other one then. Okay.
All right, so let's go in the same order. So Kingdon, we'll start with you, please. Tell us about what sets Flux apart.
I would say it's the diversity in automation and the great community. There are different opportunities for automation depending on what level you're at. You can use the basic automation, or you can go full OCI, manifest generation. So please try Flux if you haven't already, and please download the VS Code extension. We worked hard on it. Check out the pre-release channel.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your time with us today, Kingdon. Appreciate you. Goodbye. All right, Christian, you're up.
Yeah, so closing statement. So I guess just come join the third largest growing project in the CNCF. It's very, very, very popular. It is written for developers, but that doesn't mean it's exactly for developers as well. So if you're an admin, if you're a developer, come join the CNCF Slack. Come join the party with the Argo project community.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Christian. See you at KubeCon, friends. Oops, I cut him off. Scott, tell us about kapp-controller. What sets it apart?
Yeah. So I think kapp-controller really, it's the composability of it and the ability to use multiple fetch sources, multiple template sources, including native support for Q, YTT, all of that, which just makes it easy, simple. There's no way around security. There's no way around composability. You just get all of that with a simple API, and the package management capabilities just make it a ultimate GitOps tool.
Amazing. Appreciate you so much, Scott. See you next time.
Bye, everyone.
And then there were two. Did I just see you just made a comment? Should I highlight your comment?
I know that's answer to one of the questions from Daniel. No, nothing special. But you can highlight I can highlight the other comment. I prematurely. There we go. Come on, I'll do it.
There
Okay.
it is.
Nobody can actually type that. But anyways, go to vfarsik in Twitter and vote for one of those three.
Yeah.
And whichever one you vote, that's the one that we'll start with in the next episode and then move to the next subject.
Whichever one you vote for is definitively, objectively the best GitOps tool. I'm kidding. I'll say for the 5th time this episode, it's not a competition. Everyone has different use cases. Different use cases, and maybe you want to vote for the one that you're curious about and you just want to see implemented instead of voting for the one that you like. If you already use Argo CD, maybe don't vote for Argo CD so you can see kapp-controller, you know? Be creative. It's not a win-lose thing.
Exactly.
So the vote is live. It's on Twitter. As always, if anyone has a better idea of somewhere we can put up a poll, I'm all for it. And I think that's all today. Is there anything else you'd like to say in closing?
As long as that idea is not Facebook, because I'm not moving from Twitter to Facebook. Let me tell you that.
I second that. Yep. Never on Facebook again. Even though Victor and I, Victor called himself old, and I'm not too far behind. We're not Facebook.
No, not Facebook.
All right. I think that's a goodbye. This was wonderful and fun. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for an amazing chat. Thanks to our amazing guests, and thanks to everyone who watches this recording. To the very end.
Sure.
You must be doing something in your kitchen or something. I have it going in the other room. All right. Bye.
Cheers.